It has been a long journey to get to the Dark Tower. Today we're going to talk about Book 7, which is the final leg, as our protagonists work their way towards the Dark Tower and where their stories continue on or end. Man, what an amazing series this has been. If you haven't read The Dark Tower, there's going to be spoilers in this video. This is the last book, even though there is another book that comes after this called The Wind in the Keyhole, which is kind of like a prequel of sorts, I believe, that we're also going to read. All right, so when we last left off, Susanna is close to having her chap they thought was like a demon baby, which it is a demon baby for sure. Due to weird circumstances and these weird little areas they ended up with, which had like incubus and succubuses in them, the baby is Roland's baby that Susanna is having that was impregnated by these demons and these weird circles. And if you've read the series, you know what I'm talking about. I don't even know if I'm using the right terminology, if they were incubus or succubus, but I believe they were. So, anyways, and this kid, who's to be named Mordred, and his whole purpose is like kind of like an antichrist, and he's going to kill Roland so that Roland cannot reach the Dark Tower, to get to the end of his quest that he's been moving towards ever since he can ever remember. All right, so Susanna is with Mia, and they are at the Dixie Pig where she's pregnant with basically the Antichrist, Roland's kid, but it's Mia, and they're one person, but now they're kind of separate, and so they're in the basement of this place in labor. Eddie and Roland are separated from Jake and Father Callahan. Jake and Father Callahan are going to the Dixie Pig to try to save Susanna. We have Eddie and Roland. They are in a different time frame where they're going to go find John Cullum again, even though they didn't think that they'd be, meeting up with him again because he's going to play an important role in this story as well. All right, so Susanna has this kid, and you have Per Callahan and Jake. They walk in, and there's all these low men and Taheen are like these half human, half animal creatures. Like they'll have like a bird head or a weasel head or whatever, and they're all very evil people. And then there's these like different levels of vampires in this place, so they go in with the intent that they're probably going to die going into this place. They have with them this little scrimshaw turtle that when people see it, they become mesmerized with it. So Per Callahan has this, and when he gets in there, he's able to mesmerize like half of these creature things. And Jake is able to continue on to go and try to save Susanna. Mia, who all she wanted was to have this baby and to raise it, she became somewhat mortal for the purpose because she was not before. She was this weird kind of entity. I guess she was a succubus, I think. It's a crazy story. There's so many layers to this. And anyways, so Mordred is born. And Mordred, after he's born, is this baby, and Mia's like, please let me take care of him. Da 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 da. When the baby, it turns into this spider and then murders Mia. And Mia had gone mad at this point anyway, so she was kind of crazy, and that happened. But she did end up helping Susanna and told her like the password to get through some of these doors because they're in what is Castle Discordia, and Castle Discordia is this, it's almost like a way station, right? There's like 595 doors there that are doorways to the other worlds, and like some of them go to like the assassination of Lincoln or the assassination of JFK. Others go to different times in New York City and different places back to the Kala and what have you. And Susanna is able to she shoots one of Mordred's legs off, so this injures him, and he switches between spider and baby, and he's growing very fast, but he's still like a little baby. So chaos happens after this freaking kid spider baby is born. They call him like Dan Tete, which is like Little Red King. And then Roland and Eddie are trying to get to Susanna and Jake and Father Callahan to help them, but they're in a different time and place. But they also need to make sure that the Rose is safe, that the Tech Corporation meets up with Susanna's corporation to combine so that they can just every time Positronics and I believe Saber was the other corporation, like they try to, do stuff that they can like make sure that they don't buy up the things they need and do all the horrible things. This corporation needs to be formed, and that's why they need John Cullum. They need him to go find the guy who's in charge of the business that was the dental company that Susanna's father had owned because they had a ton of money. So he needs to find him. He also needs to find Aaron Deepnow and have those three come together and form the tech corporation so that they can protect the rows and try to protect the beams and all of that. So they're working on having that happen, and they have to convince John Cullum that he needs to go do that. So they're over by the area where all these walk-ins are coming in, where the world is thin in the Thinny. And so they have their palaver at this little house cottage that's in this area by the lake that all these weird half human, half animal creatures and weird people are walking through and whatnot. And so just like the worlds are starting to come together and fall apart and stuff. So they need to get that settled. And then they also realize they need to save Stephen King, the writer, because if he dies, then just the crap's gonna hit the fan. So they also need to free the breakers who are working on breaking these beams. So there's all these moving parts to this story. When they finally all meet back up together, first off, Jake and Oi are being chased by the Tahine and these lowmen as they're trying to get to this other door that Susanna had gotten to the other side of, and she's just kind of sitting on it, and she's in another place and time. And so Jake's being chased by these other people, and there's this weird mind trap down there where your biggest fear like comes to life and can actually kill you. And this is under the Dixie Pig. So he has to get to her, and then Roland and Eddie are still trying to get to them to come together and get to the next part, which is to get to Blue Heaven, which is where all the breakers are. And this is over in Thunderclap. And it's this little pocket area that they created that has all the things the breakers could possibly need, booze, virtual sex, movies, books. Like they keep it nice for them, and they feed them all the weird stuff in the children's brains so that they can break the beams and do this. And all these people, they were like clairvoyant people that I think one of the main guys who was working under the Crimson King, his name was Sayer. He hunted down a lot of the people that went to work there that were the clairvoyants, and a lot of these people were never taken seriously, and they just liked feeling like they had a purpose. So not all of them are really happy when they are liberated from this place, but once they do save what's left of the beams so that the world isn't destroyed, because they do end up saving the rest of the beams. And there's all kinds of other things that happen in between all this stuff, and like all the emotional things start to hit because the quartet is to be broken. You lose a lot of the main characters. At this point, they save the beams, but then the one guy wasn't put down well enough and he kills one of their quartet. Maybe I won't say who it is. So they will be like, they're spoilers, but I'm not going to tell you who it is. If you've read it, you know. And they were finally all together. Everyone was all like hugging each other, and they had did it, and then one of them dies. After saving the beams, they have to still go on. Someone stays behind to mourn the one who had died, and then to move on to go save Stephen King. And they're kind of mad that they have to save Stephen King because he was a lazy jackhole and he didn't write the story. Had he written the story, maybe their quartet would still be together. So all this stuff has been left up to chance. And the way Stephen King put himself into the story, it's so good. It's, a lot of people I don't think would be able to pull this off. He did a wonderful job of it. Then you get the whole story of how Stephen King gets hit by this minivan, but he lives. And in different time frames in this book, he had died. Like Susanna had heard and saw, I think it was on some random television or maybe it was radio, had heard like a list of all these like well-known people who had died, and Stephen King was one of them. But they're able to go back, and then one of them sacrifices themselves and dies to save Stephen King. So then there were two. They do continue on, and through it, there's this whole thing like Mordred is following them because Mordred wants to kill and eat Roland. He wants to eat him. Mordred is hungry. Mordred is eating everything and everyone. Creatures, humans, he does not care. He's a growing spider baby boy. So he's just out there eating people. Dreams come into a lot of factor for the story of the characters in it seeing different things in their dreams. I can't really explain stuff without telling you who died, can I? Maybe I can. We're going to keep trying just in case some of you out there haven't read this book and still decide to watch this video. All right, so one of the big things of the people who had died were like, watch out for Dandelo. Roland needs to watch out for Dandelo. Okay, so, and it's funny when when two of them were trying to get out of the castle of Discordia, there was this giant, like, tentacle worm thing chasing them this whole time, like, trying in the darkness, and they had to have, like, light bones on fire with sterno to keep it away from them. And I was like, oh, that had to be Dandelo. It totally wasn't. And then they continue on and they come across the Crimson King's castle, and the Crimson King is no longer there. He is prisoner on the balcony of the Dark Tower. So he's been trapped in the Dark Tower all these years, and he is insane also. And so they go stop at the castle because they know that that's something they need to do. They need to see if, oh, maybe he is still at the castle, even though they're pretty sure he's at the Dark Tower. So they stop, and there's these triplets there. When they say they're shapeshifters, which I believe they are, but they all take on the visage of Stephen King, and they tell them a little bit about the journey going forward. And they had these baskets of things like to offer them, like it had been really, really cold. And so they're like, oh, we have sweaters and gloves and da 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 da. And like the two know that they probably shouldn't. Okay, Roland is obviously still alive, right? Roland in the Dark Tower. So he's still alive. They probably would have killed them had they not, refused the baskets of crap that they're giving them. And as soon as they do, too, like they pull out guns and try to kill him, but they take him out. And then the one guy is left because, they need to leave someone for Mordred to come talk to / eat. And then as they get closer to the Dark Tower, they come to this place on Odd Lane. An Odd Lane, this is the place. This is where Dandelo is. Because Odd Lane turned out to be like, is it an anagram? Is that what it's called when you rearrange the letters? But they don't see this at first. So there's this old man, and there's this ugly, pustule, gross, really skinny horse that the old man keeps around. While this old man is actually a vampire that feeds on emotions. He also has someone very important in his basement. But the two that go there, Roland and the other person who's still alive, they almost frickin' die. But the one person had something on their face because the air all in Thunderclap is poisonous AF. And the thing on their face exploded and they had to go into the bathroom. And there was a note left in the bathroom, which was from Stephen King because he leaves hints for his protagonists sometimes hidden throughout the place. Figures it out and is able to stop this guy, vampire, from killing Roland. They make it out of there alive and continue on to the tower. The horse left after its master was like killed. And that horse, there's this whole like weird story about it that maybe it was like the devil's steed. So I don't know. Make of that what you will. And at some point, Mordred ends up eating that horse and probably shouldn't because it gave him explosive diarrhea, and that diarrhea won't stop. It's pretty bad, and he's barfing, and yeah, it's a good time. He's got that going on, but yet he still follows because now he's even more angry. And Roland does make it to the Dark Tower, but he has to keep going alone. And the person that was in the basement was this artist. His name is Patrick Danville, and the vampire was keeping him down there and feeding off his emotions. And this artist had painted a picture of the Dark Tower and different other images that Roland and some of the others had seen, and they were so lifelike and they evoked these emotions and just were very emotionally moving to them. What it turns out this artist can do And why they had him imprisoned is because he can create with his art, like literally draw into existence. And they had taken away all his erasers because he can erase things from existence. Another thing too, the Crimson King had killed himself so that he couldn't be killed. So he's still alive, but he's dead. And they're like, well, Roland, you're not going to be able to kill him because there is no way to kill him because he's already dead. But because the artist, they freed him and took him with him, the artist is going to be able to like save the day and erase this guy. And so Roland makes it to the tower. And the ending, I don't know how everyone else felt about this ending. It seemed to me correct. You know, it's like a story of reincarnation and learning to do things better a little bit each time with what happens. And at first, when you read it, you think they tell you that he enters, but yet they don't say what happens. And you're like, but it was cool. He finally made it. This was the end of the journey. He's there. And then King goes on, and you have what happens on the other side of the door of where the other character who was still alive went and who they run into once they've gone through this other doorway into another time, into another dimension. And King's like, I can leave you here with these happier memories with this person, but you probably still want to know what happens when Roland goes in the Dark Tower and as he goes up the stairs and goes to each level and what's at the top. What's at the top? Well, I can't tell you. You have to make the journey yourself. What a journey it is. I can't wait to read The Wind in the Keyhole because, man. And yeah, the story is super emotional. I cried a bunch. Of course I did. I think that Oi is my favorite Stephen King character ever. Yeah, it's because I like animals better than humans. So, and I was looking online too. I wanted to see if there was any like good Oi t-shirts. There's a couple, none of them are that great. I kind of picture Oi as a red panda. Like how he was described so reminds me of a red panda. Or I guess a tanuki or something like that. But anyways, this book's amazing. I loved it so much. What an amazing fantasy series. Quite possibly my new favorite fantasy series. Me and Jason of Jason's Weird Reads will be recording a podcast episode for this. So this will be the 7th episode that we will have recorded for his podcast Weird Reads. I'll have a link down below if you want to check that out. And I'm not sure when this episode will be up. It'll probably be a bit, but you can listen to at least like the the first 5 books in the series. And then we're going to do The Wind in the Keyhole too. This book was fantastic. I thought it was a really amazing ending to the saga that was The Dark Tower. It took a whole year to read the series. We did take a 2-month hiatus. I had to do a couple readathons, so that kind of just, I was not able to fit in this like giant chonker of a book. You know, what can I say? Like, obviously I love the characters. I love the story. I loved how everything was interwoven. I thought how Stephen King put himself in the story was fantastic. A lot of people say, you know, it's the ego and arrogance and this, that, and the other, but the way it was done was just so freaking good. If you've read it, let me know what your thoughts were on that. Let me know how you felt about the ending. Like, I thought it seemed appropriate and was really good. It's always sad when you end a series like this because it's like saying goodbye to old friends, you know? You're like, ah, this was the last leg of the journey. But it's not because we do have that one more book. And The Dark Tower is the center of the universe of all Stephen King's books. So, you know, we're going to read in the future. I'm going to go back and read Salem's Lot, which had a huge tie-in with this. And then I'm going to read The Stand too, because that was one of the worlds that they all came out into in this book too. And I had never read The Stand. The Stand's another huge, giant book that I'm going to get into. But yeah, I loved it. It was freaking great. And I also now have a playlist. This will be the 7th in it, but it goes 1 through 7 if you want to start at the beginning and watch the whole playlist. That'll be at the end of this coming up, will be the playlist if you want to click into that and see some of the other videos and my other thoughts on the other books. And as soon as I read The Wind in the Keyhole, I'll finally make a determination of in what order I actually like the book. So maybe I'll do a ranking video of how I felt about each book. If you haven't read The Dark Tower and you're looking for a great dark fantasy series, I would highly recommend it. And if you enjoyed hanging out today, hit that subscribe button, come back, see me again, and we'll talk about more bookish things and weird stuff.